Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino Securities, Security Confidential. Today, we are honored to have another great guest join us. Joshua Brown is with us. Joshua is the CISO at H&R Block, a company that is very well known. And I'm sure all of you have probably associated with them at one time or another. He has deep experience in designing and building information security programs. He is an expert on zero trust, which we're going to talk about. His approach to information security, I find somewhat unique, and I really want to get into this, is because he says it is to transparently support and drive business initiatives, leveraging security capabilities to differentiate companies. And that's something that is sorely missing in the industry, if you will, from a lot of people. And Joshua has spoken at InfoSec World, at InfraGard, and at ISSA. He's a SANS mentor. In short, he is an expert in helping companies reduce risk. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Joshua, let's. There's so many questions here. Well, I found your background fascinating. So you by your education, you have a great liberal arts education. You've studied philosophy in great depth, and somehow you ended up.
Took a hard left turn.
Was this a lot of bad decisions? Good luck, or what was?
Well, when I started undergrad, I was convinced that I wanted to be an MD. I was a biology chemistry double major, which was a huge mistake. I got to the point of shadowing physicians at Duke University Med Center. Like I was all in on this. We have lots of doctors in my family. My brother's a surgeon. Brother-in-law and sister-in-law are both doctors. My uncle was a flight surgeon for the Navy. Like we have a history there, right?
Believe me, you're talking to someone that has the exact same story. Yep. That's uncanny. But
what I realized as I was studying that is that I was miserable. I didn't enjoy it. I mean, intellectually, I'm fascinated with biology and chemistry and all those things, right?
Sure.
Turns out I wasn't excellent at doing them. And I realized the only classes I was really enjoying were the philosophy classes I was taking. So I ended up pursuing a PhD in philosophy. I got pretty far down the road on that. I spent about 5 years. I didn't finish my dissertation. I finished everything else, and I got really burned out after that, and I decided to take a sabbatical. And I went to the Motley Fool and got a job on the help desk. And the rest is kind of history. I was sitting right next to the security team. I think I absorbed a fair bit through osmosis, but I found what they did just fascinating because it touched every single aspect of the IT infrastructure, as well as the people part, right? So this was embarrassingly long ago. I feel like I date myself whenever I talk about it, but it was still when I think InfoSec was a very young practice springing off as a sub practice out of IT. And so, it was natural for me to go from a help desk job to a server job to a fiber networking job to eventually InfoSec. So I've been doing InfoSec now for 18 years or so. I've been in IT for about 25, and it's been a pretty crazy journey.
Fascinating. The Motley Fool, that brings back memories. Those guys, the Gartner brothers, wrote a couple great
fantastic books, and they're genuinely fantastic guys. Getting to work in that.
Oh, you've met them.
I mean, it was very much a startup environment. We had about 400 people at the company at the Fool at that point. They came into the office regularly. We worked with them all the time. I mean, super approachable and just great guys. Really great, and it's still a great company. I think they have the best domain ever. Fool.com, I think, is brilliant, right?
Yeah, I know that it used to be. I think the tagline was "A fool is a motley fool" or something like that.
It comes from the Shakespearean, right?
Books.
Yeah, and just really turning and this idea of returning the power to individuals to manage their own future. I love that concept.
That's awesome. So we see prior to the show we were talking just a little bit about that's such a diverse background that you have, an eclectic background, and how you got into cyber. We're seeing companies, not just companies, but institutions put in place programs for cybersecurity professionals. And I'm part of such a group at Slippery Rock University where we try and advise them on the industry advisory board on what to do with cybersec. Do you think that are we going to be better served having just straight computer science or cybersec people, or is that background of diversity essential to the success of an information security program?
Yeah, Manoj, it's a great question, and I wrestle with this one a lot philosophically. I mean, I think I believe that having as much diversity of background, of thought, of experience in your InfoSec program as possible gives you a better chance of solving tough problems. I don't want everybody looking like me, coming from my same background, trying to solve a problem, because you're going to approach it with a very specific set of lenses that's determined by your experience as a person. So I want lots of lenses. I worry about this push towards pre-professional programs at all schools, and well, not all, but most schools now have InfoSec programs, right? And so, you're not going to be studying philosophy, you're not going to be looking at art history or music appreciation or physics. Like, you're going to be doing computer science. Now, I think there's great value in every InfoSec professional learning a programming language. Like, if I really could right now only hire people that had a development background, I would do it. But I think the key is, ultimately, I'm focused on finding the right people for my program, not necessarily the right skills. Skills can be taught, and tech is changing so fast that I think we have to do a better job of not being gatekeepers about who can join an InfoSec team. If you find the right person with the right passion, the right intellect, you can make them, help mold them and mentor them into the kind of InfoSec professional that you need and that they're going to be highly successful and fulfilled at doing. We have 700, 800,000 open positions in the US, right? And something like 3 million globally. So if we're looking for entry-level people and we're saying, well, you got to have your CISSP, which cracks me up because it's not an entry-level cert, right? But we want certain experience, and yet we can't get enough people at that level. So I think as security leaders, it's incumbent on us, and more so than that, it's our duty to train the next generation of security professionals. And that means being open to investing your time, your people's time in grooming and building a cadre of skilled professionals with as diverse a set of backgrounds you can. I have tons of people on my team now that are have no InfoSec background. They came in and they're just kicking ass. I've got second career people like ex-cops, ex-military, ex-healthcare, and giving people the right opportunity and the right resources they need to fulfill those roles. That's our job. And not turning people away simply because, oh, well, you haven't had 3 years of experience at this particular SIM tool, or it's we're shooting ourselves in the foot and then complaining about how much it hurts.
Joshua, I'm smiling because our listeners have heard this quite a few times from me, but they're hearing it from an honest to God CISO at a major company now. Some of the best engineers that we've ever hired, they didn't have computer science degrees. One of them came out of high school, and they just had a passion. We've taken people out of the military, more than half our companies out of the military. And as long as you have the work ethic and the passion, what you're saying is so right. You can teach the skill, but you can't teach them how to be a strong person, a good person.
I used to make a joke that, like, my only 2 criteria for hiring is smarter than me and not a sociopath. Right. And it always gets a laugh line, right? And so I kind of stopped saying it, but it's really true. Like, I want you to care about your coworkers. I want you to care about the job you're doing. And as far as the technical skills, if you're lacking something, we'll get you there. That's, and I think that is the kind of, I think that's the kind of approach we have to take in terms of building highly successful teams. We have to have skin in the game. You can't just say, well, I'm going to hire the absolute most skilled people I can. No, you need to be getting people fresh out of college, getting people excited. There's so many people out there still that have no idea that, like, this is a career path. That's just not what their background is. And I mean, one of the most successful people I have on my team right now had a nursing background, had no IT experience, and came out of an accelerator program that H&R Block has, which is largely designed for software engineers. But we've got 3 or 4 just amazing engineers out of it ourselves now for InfoSec, and watching those talents progress and watching their minds click and get it, it's so rewarding. And I guess it goes back to my love of teaching, right? I can't ever let go of that part.
That's fantastic. And I know we actually have one hardcore listener that is going to love that comment because she came into this world from nursing as well. And it's good to know you're not alone. And, InfoSec, I should say, is one of those few places where I am told statistically, women actually end up making a little bit more money than men, according to the recruiters. And that's one of the few professions where women have the edge. So if you're listening out there, think about it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it goes to the diversity of background, diversity of thought, right? Again, if everyone looks like me on my team, we're not going to be necessarily more effective at solving problems because we don't have all the different lenses that you need to unlock tough problems. We really focused on diversity of background during the Great Resignation, or Great Reshuffle, or Great Upgrade, or whatever we want to call it, right? And
what do I want to call it?
we ended up, our team is extremely diverse now, and I think the results that we're getting show the efficacy of that train of thought.
That's excellent. One of the 2 problems that I've seen that happen when you get people with a pure maths, computer science type of background is that, one, cybersecurity is really a business problem. It's not a technology
That's
problem.
exactly right.
And to understand it from that aspect, you have to go beyond the ones and zeros. And you have to bring the people into the equation. It's something that I hope people are tired of hearing from me, but it's true. If you can't get the people in your company to come along and play ball with you, you're not going to have a very good program. Right. And that requires more than ones and zeros. The second thing is understanding your adversary.
That's right.
Right. And I've been pushing for psychology classes, for understanding, getting some diversification, getting some criminal background classes. And people need to understand who they're playing ball with. I haven't been very successful at that, but hey, I keep trying.
I mean, I think it's getting better, and I'm glad to hear that, you're fighting the good fight there too. I think it's absolutely critical. And you're right, the people skills, the soft skills, whatever you want to call them, thinking about things deeply and having different lenses. I mean, one of the great benefits, we joined the FS ISAC, Financial Services ISAC, a couple of years ago, and we were the first non-bank entity to do so. And that's, there's ISACs for all sorts of different verticals.
Sure.
I highly encourage companies to join because seeing what your peers in the industry, even your competitors, seeing what they're facing, being able to share, we really are all in this together. And so, yeah, I think that having a great security program can be a competitive differentiator for a business, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't share indicators of compromise that you've seen with your peers through an ISAC. Or get some of those feeds from other people. I think that kind of threat intel, we can't be walling off our information because we're all just going to get creamed by it.
Well, there's a lot of stigma in sharing.
Sure is,
that,
yeah.
Right, because you're admitting that there was a problem of some kind, and that a lot of breaches are still underreported.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But growth comes at the point of struggle. I think Brene Brown said that one. I love that thought, right?
Yes.
And so, why would we not take a learning that is the good guys finally standing up and beating the bad guys for a change? Why wouldn't we share that with other people in the industry, right? We have to, we really have to approach this as we're all in it together. Otherwise, we're all going to get picked off one at a time, right? You can be faster than the slowest person, but eventually all the slow people get eaten, and now the bear's still hungry.
That's a great way to put it. I love it. Let's get back to something you said, using cybersecurity as a
Mm.
competitive advantage. How do you do that? How do you use these technologies to
Yeah, I
pull
mean,
that off? Some
yeah. So
examples.
I think there's a few different ways to look at it. There's the obvious, like cybersecurity as a marketing perspective, right? Like um, companies that have a play, think about big banks like Cap One or US Bank or any of those, right? They're touting like military grade encryption, and they throw those terms out there because
Right.
they know that their customers are going to be anxious about those very things, right? As a player in the
Yep.
financial services industry, Block, obviously, we care a great deal. I mean, our reputation is built around that we take care of our customers' data. And we have probably some of the most toxic data you could have, by nature of the business that we do,
Oh,
right? Personal financial data is just, extremely sensitive, and so we take that responsibility very seriously. I think that, from a services perspective, if you're trying to differentiate yourself, offering direct benefits to your customers in that realm, you get sort of the halo effect, right? So credit monitoring services are provided for free, or dark web monitoring services, or things like that. Um,
sure.
and then there's uh, the way that I think most people think about this is cybersecurity is kind of a bastion. So when your competitors are showing up in the news for the wrong reasons, you don't have to come out and say, "Yeah, we're super secure." But if you are, the Walmart at the time when or when Target's getting popped,
Right.
right? It's becoming a differentiator for you because you're not in the news. It's very rare that you get in the news for a cybersecurity thing, and it's a good thing.
That's true. But let me ask you this. Have you seen any corporation use, like, let's take IAM
Mm,
as an example, IAM technologies to drive a brand loyalty program? I've
uh,
often, if you think about it, right? I mean, you look at somebody. I'll just pick somebody random out of thin air, like um, the limited group of companies, right? They own
yeah,
Gap, they own Victoria's Secret. How many of the same people have signed up for emails at Victoria's Secret that are the
right,
same
yeah,
people at Gap, that are the same people at Old Navy? And if you can consolidate those
right.
identities, maybe you can figure out what they're actually
No, I
doing.
think, anything you can do to reduce customer friction, reduce we talk a lot internally about reducing attack surface on our corporate networks. But really, it's the same thing you're talking about here, right? If I've got 6 different accounts because I got Banana Republic and Gap and Old Navy and Victoria, all
Yeah.
those things, right? And I guarantee you most people are using the same password across all of those. So one of those gets popped, and
Oh,
now they're all popped. No, I think that's a fascinating question. I mean, I think, it's incumbent on us to, if we're trying to help our business, and part of the business is attracting new revenue streams through additional customers, we want to make that sign up process as easy and as painless as possible, right?
yes,
And we want to make it so that, if you have to give information, you only have to give it once. We don't want to have to keep going back to the well. But a lot of
absolutely.
companies view that as an opportunity to take shortcuts, right? So, well, we're not gonna to double opt in. We're not going to force, a password security of certain length or complexity, or whatever. Happily, technology is stepping in to help on some of these areas, but I think you're right, especially for these holding companies where you've got a lot of brands under one roof. Why not
Oh,
do a single sign-on type thing and help those things converge?
converge, and now you can actually track real buying patterns, and you know that yahoo.com, J at Yahoo, J at Gmail is the same person.
That's right.
So maybe you can even set pricing for the, I don't know, it always occurs to me, and I'm just using that one example, there's a lot of technologies that enable infosec that could be used for some very good things, for potentially adding additional
Sure.
revenue streams to the
Well, and I think what we're also seeing is this convergence of your work identity with your personal digital identities, right? So, I know that InfoSec professionals like to scream about people using their corporate email addresses to sign up for services and websites and things like that, but there isn't yet, I think, a really ubiquitous good solution for, okay, cool. How about if I just have one set of identities and I use that everywhere, right? If I only had to manage one, it could be super secure. Of course, then you run the problem of like, if that one gets popped, now we've got a really big problem. But frankly, with the number of people that have crappy passwords and you reuse them in lots of places, we may already have this issue. We just don't realize it.
Oh, yeah, that's a heartening
Yeah.
thought there. A disheartening thought, I should say. So, getting back to threat surfaces, what do you think? Like in the professional service arena, what's facing professional service firms from a threat?
Yeah. So, I've been reading a
Perceived.
lot about this lately, and there's a lot, I think a lot of the conventional wisdom, it's not that it's wrong, it's just I think it may be missing the point a little bit. So you'll hear a lot of people
Okay.
say like, okay, insider threat are your own employees, because even if you don't have any malicious insiders, uh, code errors, configuration errors, of course, phishing and ransomware attacks, we see stuff in the news on, daily about this. Others say
Right.
third-party risk, and gosh, we've certainly seen a lot of that with SolarWinds, with Kronos, et
Oh
cetera.
yeah. Target.
Right, yeah, right, yeah. Your HVAC
HVAC
guy, right?
guy.
Who expects their HVAC guys to be excellent at cybersecurity? Like zero people expect that. So I don't think that these views are wrong necessarily. I just think they're too tactical in nature. Um, in my view, the biggest threat is not having a holistic view of information security. So, I used to use this mantra or trope around visibility, intelligence, response. Like those are the three buckets, and everything is going to turn on those. So visibility is crucial for developing a realistic sense of the threats, the particular threats that face your company, not just the threats that everybody faces. Um, but you have to apply business intelligence to make sense of those threats, right? So everything that you see out
Yep.
there, it's like getting a generic threat feed for financial services. That's not going to be very helpful for us. You have to apply our business
Right.
logic to understand what layers of defense make the most sense based on a variety of factors. And then how well situated are you as an organization in terms of your ability to contain and recover in case there is a security incident. So um, and the fascinating thing about contain and recover, how you respond to an instance, the old Mike Tyson quote, right? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. You can have a
Yep.
great incident response plan, but
True.
if you're not drilling on that and involving corporate communications and legal and HR and your executive and all of that crisis comms, you're not going to be well polished when an incident happens, and you're going to stumble out of the gate. And especially if you're a publicly traded company, that is a very bad position to be in. So you want to be, I hate to say it, but like you need to be a well-oiled machine for incident response. And that means you got to actually practice it with people who aren't part of your team.
Well, you just teed up a whole bunch of questions better than I could have ever done. I'll tell you that, which gets, having that holistic view starts with
Mm,
risk. And I'll tell you, that term is a little adulterated in our industry only because everybody, like, find me an InfoSec or cybersecurity website that doesn't talk
yeah,
about risk in some
yeah.
way, right? How do you
Mm,
actually really, if you're starting something off, how do you measure and
yeah.
define it?
A great question. And I think if there was a great answer that resonated with everyone, we would have solved this problem. But if you just look at the number of different frameworks there are for measuring and monitoring risk, right?
Oh my
Right.
God.
And
We don't have all
I
day for
know,
that
but like
one.
we've been, I've been talking with some of my peers in the industry about the FAIR model, which I think has some fantastic advantages to it. Directly linking impact to real dollar impact, right? So speaking the language of the non-InfoSec professionals. Um, and there's lots of ways that you can try to manage risk that are inappropriate from a financial standpoint, right? Because we could spend uh, our entire revenue stream on InfoSec, and that doesn't mean we're not going to get attacked, that we're not going to get breached, right? So there's a point
Absolutely.
where buying down your risk um, is not advantageous anymore. Um, but I think the big key thing is risk is not just an information security concept. It is not an IT problem. You said this earlier, right? Businesses are starting to realize that security risk is business risk. And so
Right.
if we can all speak the same language, we can at least start moving forward in terms of how we prioritize efforts inside and outside of information security. If we can't get to that common language, if we are trying to force non-IT and non-InfoSec people to speak our language, it's going to be a miserable failure, right? And so, one of the things you were talking about is how, the role of a CISO. I think a lot of times we focus on the ISO part and not the C part. All the other C-level executives are not information security professionals. They are not,
That's
most
right.
of them, except for the CIO or the CTO, are not IT professionals. So it's incumbent on us to meet them where they are, not drag them to where we are and beat them over the head with technology terms, right? We're all trying to manage risk. I need them to tell me what they're worried about. It's not what keeps me up at night. I know all the stuff that I'm thinking about and worrying about from a risk perspective. We got those covered. I'm worried about the things I don't know about because I haven't been in the room for the conversation or the InfoSec team hasn't been at the table when a decision's being made.
Which gets to the question of how do you determine what's the floor on risk? And you
Yeah,
alluded to this, at some point it doesn't make any sense to buy it
right.
down. So at what point does the mitigation stop? And how do you get a company acceptable or to accept that they're never going to be 100% breach
Right.
safe, if that's a
Yeah.
term, but it's down to an acceptable
Yeah.
level?
Some of the risk models crack me up, and it's no wonder that they don't end up being operationally terribly effective because, if you go to your board and you're like, well, we've looked at the frequency and the impact, and we believe that data security is a 7. Like, what the hell does that mean,
What?
right? Um,
Yeah,
the other
exactly.
thing is that we oftentimes make the mistake of talking about risk, communicating about risk in a way that, like, if you just give us some money, we'll make the risk go away. We're not removing risk. Mitigation is not removing risk, it's reducing it. So it's like shaving. I'm not removing hair, I'm reducing hair, like beard reduction, not beard removal. Um, so when you think about that, and you can just have these straight up conversations with people about, look, there's a certain amount of money we need to spend on prevention. There's a certain amount of money we need to spend on detection and visibility. And there's a certain amount of money we need to spend on recovery because anyone can be breached with, we have a limited number of resources, time, people, tools, whatever. Our
Sure.
attackers do not. They have unlimited time. They have, in case of nation states, essentially unlimited budgets. So the right motivated attacker can find a way in. How do we make sure
Absolutely.
that we detect that as quickly as possible if and when it happens, and we mitigate the damage that causes to the smallest possible level that we can? That's what true risk mitigation looks like. So if I tell them, like, hey, look, if anyone who works on this project, if their account gets compromised, the impact is contained to this little blast radius, and that
Yeah.
the cost associated with that is 40 man hours of work, or you have to put it in some terms like that, and then people understand. Every time I want to go to the board or to my boss and ask for money for something, that risk calculation, including the business impact analysis and the cost, has to be there. That's the level of rigor that is expected outside of IT. It should be no different for us looking for money to solve problems.
Absolutely. The only thing I would add to that, what you're describing is defense in depth
Yep.
to a to a large
Yeah, and
degree.
we have to keep trumpeting that because I think, so many IT people and certainly InfoSec people are technophiles, right? We love technology. I don't
Oh yeah.
believe that we've ever completely solved a security problem by buying a piece of technology, right? It's always part of a bigger, right? People, process, technology in that order. So you get your people right, you get your
Well,
process right.
that's a big myth that you just busted.
Well,
So
I mean, and it's not popular with, especially with salespeople. Like, I get that. I love technology too. But that's the last level. That's the instantiation and enforcement of your policy layer. Um,
right.
so again, you have to think about this holistically, and all too often you'll get a new, you decide, like, we're going to go down this path, we're going to implement this platform. Here's the benefits it's going to have. Here's the costs. Look at the ROI. This is a slam dunk. And they're like, okay, what about that thing you bought 3 years ago? Can we roll that off now? Like, no. and here's why, right? And look, I want a lean tech stack. I don't want a bunch of different tools, a lot of complexity in the environment. That's kind of the enemy of security. It's picking the right tools to help you achieve the outcomes that you want to achieve. And defense in depth is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, and it's one. It's a topic that I don't think most people understand outside of the security realms, and it's really an outgrowth of a military strategy. And they just, I guess, the industry hasn't focused on it. They really love
Yeah.
technology, which really brings me to the question of the
Mm,
people. So, how do you establish in your organization a culture
mhm.
of cybersecurity? And I'm not saying paranoia, but
Yeah,
vigilance, understanding, that bringing the masses into that they're part of an InfoSec
yeah,
program. They're not
right.
outside of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously I started as an educator. My parents were both teachers. I have a great love of teaching and helping people learn anything from mentoring to actually teaching classes. And I think that I go back and forth on it on security awareness training. Actually, I kind of view it now as table stakes, and but I don't have any illusions about how effective it is overall by itself. So, if you have 100,000 people in your company and you force them all to take, phishing training, like we do it monthly,
Okay.
uh, and if to be breached, you only need one person to click out of those 100,000, right? So, are you ever going to get to 99.99% effective? No, of course not. I want to get
No.
and if your security stack and the success of your security program depends on non-IT, non-technical, non-security people making the right decision 100% of the time, you're gonna fail. So you have to think about,
Right.
okay, what happens if somebody first of all, if the phishing message gets past all of our filters and our technology stack and gets clicked on, and the person gets compromised, okay, now what, right? What are the other defenses we have to prevent actual damage from taking place? Um, I think the other part is you have to be, if you want to be a partner to the rest of the business, you first have to see yourself as part of the business, which means people on my team need to understand what our business imperatives are, how we're trying to achieve those, what's going on in the boardroom. Part of that is my job to communicate that. Part of that is the leadership team at your company being open and transparent with the company about where they're putting their efforts and what they're trying to do.
Right.
If we don't have a deep understanding of how the business works, we're only going to be accidentally successful, and nobody wants to be in that position. So if you show time and time again that you can come to the table, contribute to what the business is trying to do, even accelerate it, find ways to solve problems that make things better for them and for you, they're going to
Yep.
start inviting you to that party, right? You're going to be the cool guy that gets to hang out instead of the guy that wears all black and stands in the corner by himself.
And that is a problem in by itself. So there's a perception in a lot of companies that the IT guys are some people wearing hoodies in a back room
Yeah.
somewhere, right? And they're largely the department
Yep.
of no. So anytime you go to them, the answer is always
Yep.
no. And this is how one of the ways in which we get shadow IT,
Right.
because people are not going to stop doing their job. They're going to find a way to do their job in spite of whatever controls are put in place.
Yeah.
So how that what you're talking about, getting the cybersec people to understand the business and then understand the people and the business of the business, that's a big
Yeah.
lift.
I mean, I think so. If your InfoSec program has the reputation of being the Department of No, like you've got a serious problem. Um, I like to call it the place where good ideas go to die, right? You don't want to be viewed that way. And so a story I like to tell, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a great story, so I'm going to continue telling it, is the first cars that rolled off
Please.
the assembly line didn't have brakes. They didn't need them. They didn't go fast enough to need brakes. Brakes were added later to help cars go faster safely. And that's how I view InfoSec, right? Yes, we're going to put some guardrails up there. Um, a phrase we use internally a lot is like, we want to create a safe space for people to try dangerous things. So all the cloud guardrails that we put in place, those are programmatic. They happen in the background. They're going to make sure that you don't do something that could bring harm to the company. But otherwise, like, go to town, knock yourself out. Like, we feel confident about the framework that we built. I think the problem is that a lot of people, and this is getting better, so I'm not pessimistic about this, but a lot of people feel like the role of the security department is to tell people no, because we're protecting them from themselves. Look at this terrible decision you almost made. We're not going to let you do that. That is not our job. Our job is to help the business make well-informed, risk-based decisions. If you do this, here are the likely outcomes attached to dollars, right? Now, if you want to make that decision, you're accepting the risk, right? Here's a risk acceptance form. Sign off on this, and you're good, right? And we're going to track that because it's probably going to be an exception to our policies. So we're going to track that in an online system. And every 12 months, we're going to revisit this and make sure that the business is still comfortable accepting that risk. Our job is to track that risk and make sure the business is aware of what its risk profile is.
See, that is really cool what you just said, and that can be put in operationally by any firm listening to
Correct.
this show.
Even if you're using a spreadsheet, right? It doesn't matter. Post-it notes, but you have to track it. You have to be aware of it.
You must. Yeah, and don't say no. Say, all right, if that's brilliant, because now the element of the why is coming into the equation, and that's something that we see often is sorely missing. If people understand the why behind something, they're going to be apt to follow it versus just a plain mandate that says you must do this. Nobody knows why.
I mean, look, 100%. I could not agree with you more about the why. And I think the why is critical for team building. It's critical for execution. It's critical for having a shared understanding of decisions that are being made, right? I'm going to tell you, I tell my people, I try to get the why across. That's the most important bit. The how and the what, I leave to them. Like, chart your own path, figure out how to solve problems, and we'll get there. But my goal as a leader is to get everybody aligned on a common purpose that they understand, that resonates with them. They understand what they're contributing. They're understanding what they get if the outcome is achieved. And then we all move together, right? At that point, the discussions about the how and the what can take place full-fledged. Like, go tussle, figure it out, and then everybody's going to pull in the same direction when a decision's made.
So I got to ask you this question because you're a SANS mentor, and
it's been a while, but yeah.
For people listening, and you mentioned cloud, how you've programmatically secured put some guardrails in place for the crowd. There's another myth. You already busted one, so let's try for number 2. And that is that because I am using Amazon, Microsoft, Google, or whatever variety of cloud I am using, cybersecurity is taken care of, and I don't have to really worry about it.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most dangerous myths. I mean, so there are a couple things. I think at the most basic and pedantic level, you could say, you just exchange the word cloud with someone else's computers, right? So, and obviously it's much more sophisticated challenge than that, but all of the providers, all the major cloud providers publish documents that show you where the cloud provider's responsibility stops and yours starts. So they are responsible for the security of their platforms. They're not responsible for the security of how you utilize their platforms. So sure, you can take an S3 bucket and make it open to the world. They'll let you do that. It's not the default configuration, but you absolutely can, and we see it happen constantly. This is not to say, by the way, that the Microsofts and the Amazons and the IBMs and the Oracles and the Googles of the world don't have great security teams that are monitoring their environments, right? They absolutely are.
Sure they do.
But you're putting your applications in their space, right? So look, if you want to do infrastructure as a service and you want to stand up virtual machines, like, the slider for where the security responsibility starts is going to move farther to your side. If you want to go all the way up and you're just consuming software as a service, the slider is going to go farther to the provider's side. but you have to be aware of those different, and most people have a variety of services of different tiers, right? Platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and software as a service. Um, it's not, this isn't all about cost saving, and it isn't all about reducing the size of your staff, and it is a lot about, speed to business and speed of innovation, but you still can't forget your responsibilities. And I think that's the key point.
I think we all really appreciate that. I think people need to hear that from other professionals, and they need to understand, because I can't tell you the number of executives that we've run into that believe, well, we're using Microsoft 365. Microsoft's taking care of all that. I'm like, okay, if you say so, how you configure it, that's up to
Yeah,
you. That's your
right.
choice. And have you looked
Yeah.
at it? Let's, sticking to the topic of
Mm,
cloud, and you're an expert on zero
mm,
trust. What's your opinion on
mm.
SASE versus zero trust? Is it an either or
No, so, like,
I'm
no,
sorry.
like everything else, the marketing machine gets a hold of these terms, and then your executives are on a plane and they have the in-flight magazine and it's trumpeting like zero trust, the next most important thing. And before you know it, every product out there has, like, they've slapped a, like, now with 100% more zero trust label on the front of it. And you look at some of these products and you're like, this has absolutely nothing to do with zero trust. Um, and the other frustrating thing is, for anybody who's been in the game for a while, these aren't new concepts either, right? So we want
Right.
to give people the access they need to do their jobs. So they need access to resources only when they need that access, and then you remove it when they don't need it. And giving access to that resource or resources doesn't confer access to anything else, right? So all you're doing is, you're basically micro perimeterizing your people at that point. Like, I'm just going to put a tiny bubble around you, and you do this thing, and I'm going to make a risk-based analysis on whether or not you get access to this thing, assuming you're authorized to get access to it.
Yeah,
There are, of course, technology enablers for this. So the ability to say, oh, okay, well, you're on a corporate controlled endpoint that's got a certificate on it that's bound to your identity, and oh, I see you're in this group that gives you access to this thing, and you're coming from a country you've always come from at a time you've always come, right? All those behavioral bits. We stir all that soup up, and we get a risk rating on the person, and that determines, like, okay, well, now I need a multi-factor. I need your token because it's 3
yeah.
a.m. and you never tried to access at 3 a.m. Or, hey, that's weird. You're coming from Vietnam and I've never seen that either. Like,
Yeah.
but these aren't new concepts. It's if anything
Right.
else, it's a framework that's helping us stitch things together. And I love to see the federal government getting into this game, not because they have a great track record at information security. They don't.
Oh, they
But
don't. They absolutely don't.
drawing a line in the sand and saying everybody has to do this, like, this will move the needle. It will force some things. But ultimately, we're back to questions about, how do you manage identity, right? Because that's foundational to all of this.
Right.
How much visibility do you have to behavior in your organization with your devices, with your applications? Are you getting all that data into a place where you can actually make sense of those transactions and trace them across the environment? If you don't even have that level of visibility, and you don't have a clean identity house, like your house is not in order, you're not going to be able to go down the zero trust path. You got to fix that stuff first. It's good cyber hygiene.
Yeah. And those, you're talking about the fundamentals before. I mean, these concepts, you're right, have been there for a long, they predate the
Oh,
cloud. In fact,
absolutely.
they've been there for a long time. They're fundamentals of software design,
Right.
and
I
access
mean, look,
control. And
people have this. Some people have this view that they can just buy a product and slap it in and turn it on, and all their problems are going to be solved. And it's simply not true. Even the most, the highest Gartner and Forrester rated zero trust, SASE, whatever you want to call it, platforms and
yeah,
tools now, there is a ton of work that goes into getting those tuned and configured and effective in your environment. That's
absolutely.
assuming you have all of those prerequisites. You've got a clean identity house, and you know how to manage and monitor risk.
Now, you mentioned about the federal government getting
Mm,
in on the game. Now, this is going to put a little bit of pressure on small
yes.
businesses, small, medium
Yeah.
businesses. And when I say small, medium businesses, those companies that are like 30 to 700
Yeah.
employees, somewhere in
Yeah.
that range. those people are somewhat resource
Yeah.
limited, and we look at that. They look at the sand sliding scale that describes how they should. It's prescriptive on how they should invest. A lot of those folks cannot jump that chasm from prevention to detection and
Yeah.
response. How, and your thoughts or comments on how that problem needs to be addressed, because it needs to
Yeah.
be. It flows into third party risk with.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and I think, the money issue is very real. You can't expect a company that is the size, that is a $30 million a year company even from spending what an H&R Block spends on security, right? The risk
Sure.
models are different too. But we see this all the time with third-party vendors that we want to work with that, they're not big enough to get a SOC to really to spend the money and do that kind of thing. They,
It's a very expensive
it
exercise.
absolutely
Yes.
is. And so, um, happily there are a variety of managed security service providers that are not bad. That can give you kind of a blended security capability at a relative, well, at least at a predictable cost, right? So it's not going to be something like, oh, we had a ton of business and so our cost went through the roof. But
Right.
there's also a tipping point for companies where it makes more sense to bring those resources back in-house and do it yourself. Um,
Absolutely.
you know,
There is an inflection
there
point
absolutely is,
somewhere.
and look, I've had the good fortune of being able to build security programs in multiple companies, both ones that outsourced parts or whole aspects of the security function, and companies that have done it all themselves. Um, a managed security service provider is still a company that's trying to make money, and they do that through efficiency. And so having services they offer that can be provided across a number of customers at the same time is how they build that and how they drive their revenue. They're never going to care as much about your company as you do. That doesn't mean they can't provide better outcomes than you can for the amount of money you're spending. So if that makes sense, right? If I have if
That's a very pragmatic thought
Right. So
process.
if I have an IT team of 5 guys, like having one security guy is not sufficient. Like regardless of
That's
how
right.
much you cut off for yourself, like that is not okay. So is it better to have no security guys and outsource all of it to a provider that has trained people looking 24/7 across a variety? Like maybe, probably even. Um, and so this is like, again, you have to know your business, you have to know what the risks are, and you have to know what you're willing to spend in a responsible manner to mitigate against those risks.
So, what do you do if you are a big company and you do rely, and every large company has several small
Sure.
vendors,
Yep.
whether it's the guys that are doing um,
Yeah.
HVAC, we'll pick on
Yep.
Target there, or it's guys who are doing lawn maintenance, or for whatever reason, they are in the environment doing
Yeah.
something and it's a necessary evil.
Yeah.
How do you manage that third party
Right.
risk?
So, I think that regardless of what function a third party or fourth party or whatever is providing to you, you have to take a look at it's a serious look, and it has to be a standardized process on how you through the entire life cycle of the relationship with that partner. So before you roll them on as a provider, like, do you have a SOC 2? Can you complete a SIG-Lite? Are you going to be, and that has to be indexed against the risk in terms of what they're doing for your company. So are they accessing any customer data? Are they accessing any of your systems? If the answer to those things is no, like they provide staples for us. They provide post-it notes, like, not so worried. Like the billing relationship is going to be probably the only tech that they interact with. But if it's a provider that's going to be accessing customer data where it exposes you to privacy regulations or anything like that, the bar has to be raised. If the provider can't raise that bar, there are probably other providers that compete with them that can. But of course, you get into this space where there's a very specific niche and it's really only one player and their security
Right.
stance is not mature. What do you do? Well, you have to look at what capabilities you can offer to help mitigate that risk. So do we give them corporate managed assets that only connect through a Citrix environment or a jump box or something like that? Do we make sure that they have read-only access and the data is encrypted and we own the key? Like there are things you can do, but if where things get really ugly is if you don't have a mature program and your provider doesn't have a mature program. Like that's that's
Does it matter at that point? Because everyone's just accepted the risk and said, we'll leave it to
yeah,
Providence.
yeah. I don't think companies like that are going to stay around too long. Is what I think. But
Yeah, I agree with that. But there's a whole bunch of them
there
out
sure
there.
is. Yeah, yeah. Target rich
So
environment. Let's we can call it that.
yeah, a very, very target rich environment. So I wanted to, I know we're coming up on the hour here. I wanted to give you a chance to please let our listeners know about anything, events, things that you're doing, talks. I know you're going to be speaking at B-Sides coming
Yep.
up here. Anything, whatever, the floor is yours, whatever you'd like to
Yeah,
talk
well, a
about.
couple things. I'm going to be talking. So I am speaking at B-Sides. I'm giving a talk there, and so you want to be a CISO, kind of helping people understand what the C part means in front of it, and some of the things we've talked about today, right? Especially for young security talent that they're thinking about this is like it's the pinnacle position of InfoSec, more of a realistic, no holds barred, no varnish. Like this is what it looks like, just based on my experience, of course. I'm also going to be speaking at there's a KCIT summit happening August 23rd, I think, that CDM Media is presenting. And I'm going to talk about building a high functioning team, kind of helping Sisyphus get that
Excellent.
boulder over the top of the hill and what it looks like when you get the momentum on the other side. I do want a couple call outs. So first, Women in Security KC is an organization that we support. I'm very happy to be an advocate for them. They've been doing amazing things at getting more female voices into the InfoSec community and empowering women, which is great.
Excellent.
Also, H&R Block's own Accelerate program that I can't remember if I mentioned it or not, but basically,
You briefly, that was where the nursing
yeah.
individual
So
came from,
we
right?
take fresh college talent. It's really focused on application development, security, or software engineering, but we take a crop of new career talent. We put them in a cohort so they process through together as a group. They can lean on each other. They can learn from each other. Fantastic program. I think we run 2 cohorts a year. So that information's on H&R Block's website under careers. Definitely take a look at that. And then just a couple things that I wanted to mention, a couple books I'm reading. I encourage people like don't just read business books, get out there, read some find things that resonate with you. So I'm reading a book of Celtic wisdom called Anam Cara by John O'Donohue that I've found
Oh, awesome.
fascinating. And it's going to have some touch points from that into the talk I'm giving at the IT Summit. And then Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is a great book, just talking about how making little changes in your life and repeating those amounts to big change in the end.
That's fantastic. And you know what? We're going to get the links to the organizations and the books all into the
Awesome.
show notes.
Great.
And if you have a link to your talk for B-Sides, send that over as well. We'll get that into the show
Sure,
notes.
we'll do.
Would love to do that. This has been fantastic, Joshua. Really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to enlighten all of the common folks like me on information security. And please keep up the educational effort. I think we're severely short in our industry in that
Manoj, it's been my pleasure. Great conversation, and thanks for the platform to express my thoughts. I really appreciate it.